Hey everyone, and welcome back in. Well, this is Volume 3 of our Jagdpanther series, the final chapter. Yep, this is the one where we'll complete the process. We'll put all the finishing touches on everything. If you missed the previous two volumes, number 1 and number 2, that was construction and painting, I encourage you to go back and take a look at those. Now, Chapter 3 here, the final. Well, what will we be doing? Well, we'll be putting final touches on the model itself, getting that all ready to go. We'll take some time, well, we'll take quite a bit of time, and we'll build the base for this. And we'll start that, take it all the way from beginning to completion. We'll have time to, paint a couple of figures here. We'll do some figure painting. And we'll even have a little bit of a field trip outside of the studio. So hang on, guys. Here we go. Well, let's start things off with the base. And as usual, a little bit of the pink insulation foam. This is a scrap piece, didn't have to even cut it. This is the last piece I have in my stash. I was kind of intrigued by this photo here. I think we'll do something that's inspired by this photo. We won't do it exactly, but I think it's just a nice low-key scenic base in order to put our Jagdpanther on, just to kind of give it a little bit of a platform. So again, we're using scraps. These are all scraps that I've already used in previous projects. We'll just kind of set that there. How's that starting to look? Well, we're gonna have to scoot things around a little bit. Yep, this is how I do it, of course, just kind of plopping pieces here and there, trying to figure out some elevations, a little bit of the angles and things like that. Once I have a, sort of clear idea of what's going to happen, I'll glue a few of these in place. Of course, we can always change this later on if it doesn't work, but don't worry, I didn't have to do that this time. And then I've been encouraged to add my sidewalls first, the edging on these bases, so I don't have to come back in with the putty later on. So probably a pretty good suggestion, so I've decided to go ahead and do that here. So I'll be adding a little bit of the thin balsa wood to each of the sides, just gluing that on with a little bit of hot glue. And then once the balsa wood is applied, then I can come back with just a little bit of a rough cut and cut it down just a little bit. We'll do some final edging a little bit later on. Speaking of putty, well, we're back with my Sculpey putty. I do enjoy this putty, so this is my go-to for the moment now. Just kind of applying that all over the place, kind of blending together those elevations and adding a little bit of texture to the base itself. Once that Sculpey has dried, and then I just come back in with that terrains texture. These are the same colors, the dry ground and the dark earth, that I used when I did that weathering, the little heavier weathering on the hull of the Jagdpanther itself. That was in Volume 2, so go back and take a look at that if you missed that. Like I said, same colors, dry ground, come back in with a little bit of that dark earth, and I'll tie everything together with the model. Now I start that process of just adding layer upon layer of basically textures at this point. So I've got a little bit of railroad ballast. Using white glue here, I've thinned it down so it just squirts out of the bottle here. Just white glue, adding some little small stones. Again, that's the railroad ballast. I'll be adding a little bit of real dirt here and there. Clumps of, this is basically static grass. I'm not necessarily worried about the colors at the moment. I'm mostly trying to grab textures. This will be the seagrass, which I really enjoyed, not only the texture, but the color. And really the key for diorama bases or scenic bases, in my mind, is just adding layer after layer after layer of texture. Again, I'm not terribly worried about the colors at this point. We can unify that later on with a little bit of airbrushing or paint. But at this point, if you go out in the woods, which we're going to do in a little bit later, there's all sorts of different textures on the ground. I'm trying to replicate that here. Well, speaking of that field trip, let's take a few moments, get out of the studio, and stretch our legs. A couple of weeks ago, I needed to replenish some things in my blue bowl of good stuff. So I took a short trip up to the woods, not too far away from my home. The intention actually was to be foraging for some mushrooms, but winter came a little early this year for us, and so no mushrooms. But I did take the opportunity to look for some other things. And yes, this is still a modeling video. This is not a travel video, so hang with me here. You'll see where we're going with this in just a second. Well, since mushrooms are out of season now, I can still forage for a few other things, and this is one of the things that I came up here to look for. Yep, it's moss, but look at this moss in particular. It grows everywhere around here. It's great stuff. Look at it closely, and yep, those look like little tiny evergreen branches, right? So we'll take some of that home with us. This is where the modeling and the adventures in the woods all come together. Like I said, a nice little field trip, and I hope you enjoyed this little look into my backyard. Well, we're back at the workbench with my moss, and we'll start pulling some of this together and pulling out some of these better pieces, things that we'll be able to use. And we'll just kind of cut a few of these here and there just to get them to the right size, separate them a little bit. And of course, just leaving them as such, they'll dry out and they won't be very useful, so we'll need to preserve those. And for that, we'll be using this AK Natural Products preservative. It's basically a glycerin. So we'll just pour that over this, and we'll let this sit basically 24 hours. That's what I do anyway. So we'll just give that a stir, make sure everything's all nice and coated, and just walk away. Well, here we are the next morning, and well, it looks pretty much exactly the same. However, that fluid has saturated all this moss, and so now we can pull these out. We'll put them on a paper towel here, let them wick off and dry off just a little bit. And from this point forward, well, the color will change on these, as you'll see a little bit later on, but they'll stay nice and flexible, so they'll be preserved. They won't crumble, they won't dry, and won't flake away. Well, we'll use those in a couple different ways coming up, but let's start off by making a tree. So this is a bamboo skewer. You can also use just a stick if you'd like to. Drill in a few holes just all the way through. And then for those branches, I'll need a little bit of armature so they keep their shape. So just use a little bit of wire. We'll poke those through. Now that the armature is all in place and secure, we can come back with some clippers, kind of shape the tree just a little bit here. Now you could go fancy here and really decorate the trunk of the tree, but I'm not going to do that. So just a quick wash with some burnt umber just to darken that up a little bit. And now we can go ahead and start adding these branches. As you can see, the color on those has changed. Those have been sitting in that little bowl for maybe about a week since I first picked them and preserved them, so they've turned a more brown color, obviously, but we'll take care of that a little bit with paint. Just a matter of putting a little bit of glue on that wire, getting these to line up as you need to. And there we go. There. And pretty soon we have ourselves a fairly convincing dead-looking tree. Well, just a few passes with the airbrush with the dark green color takes care of the dead tree appearance, and now we have ourselves what looks like a pretty live evergreen tree. Of course, we're not finished with this base yet, not by a long shot. Now it's time to start adding some of the taller foliage, so some shrubbery, some bushes. Start just planting those here and there. And of course, the paintbrush is always your friend. So just pick out a few of these little places here and there, some stones, some sticks, some twigs, grass blade. Just give it a little bit of pop, a little bit of a twinkle. I do have these paper ferns that I'll be adding to the groundscape. The paper itself is a little on the brown side for what my purposes are, so I want to green them up a little bit. Yep, you could do this with the airbrush, but I hate cleaning out my airbrush after I use, so the pencils are super handy here. Just draw on some color. And then once I have those ready to go, just kind of shape these little fronds around my tweezers to give them a little bit more natural droop and sag. Now, don't skip over this part. This is where I get to say thank you to my Patreon. If you like this channel and would like to support it further, I do encourage you to come check out Patreon. Over there, early viewing of these videos, extra special feature videos, photographs of these projects as they're ongoing, final photographs, a Discord server. It's a lot of fun over there. Again, if you like this channel and would like to support it further, please, I encourage you to check it out. Well, I warned you this was going to be an action-packed episode, so yep, we're going to switch gears here. We're going to work on some figures. Now, these little figures are from Panzer Art, but more importantly, I want to say thank you to Mark at Sabot Miniatures. I ordered these from him on a Friday afternoon, and they were in my hands on Monday afternoon, so great service from those folks over there. I'd highly encourage you to check them out if you're looking for some figures. And yes, I know, I complain a lot about having to clean my airbrush, but you know, I thought I'd give these figures just a little extra attention, a little TLC, and do it probably the way you should do it. So the base color, the shadow color, burnt umber, laid that on, and then the zenithal highlights, the light shade, just an off-white from the top to show the highlights and the shadows. And then, as I always do, start with the faces and the heads, because I figure if I can get those looking right, well, then maybe the rest of the figure will look okay. Well, I think it's best just to let the camera roll. I think it shows the process fairly clearly here. A bit of a disclaimer, even though I'm showing this head and I intended to use this head, I did switch it out for a third head a little bit later on. So in the final photographs, you'll see a different head on this figure, but the process is exactly the same. So here we go. Just for a little bit of continuity, I did use this figure. I do use this figure in the final, so he gets painted in the same manner, and he has this cap that's down low over his eyes, which makes painting his face so much easier when you don't have to worry about the eyes. Well, our friend here with the low-slung cap, well, I'm going to decide, yep, he's going to have a splinter camouflage tunic, and yep, this is another first for me. I've never painted this style of camouflage before. I've got some references here off to the side. I'm trying to follow them more or less. You know, I'm not an expert at this, but it is a lot of fun. So again, let's just follow along and see what happens. Well, there's been a lot of back and forth, that's for sure. And, well, I think we're finally starting to get there, and it's starting to come to shape. A lot of the back and forth had to do with just tightening up the camouflage, adding those highlights and shadows, and kind of breathing life into the figure. Just press that head in there, hold it there with a little bit of CA. And here's our commander. Oh, and I bet you thought we were finished, but no. There's still a couple of things to take care of here. Most importantly, we have all that camouflage wire and loops on the side of the hull. And of course, we want to throw some of these branches on the side as well. So just kind of tuck those in there. And now you can see how nicely these just kind of conform to shape. They've been painted, of course, the same way as the tree in a dark green acrylic color. And just kind of weave those in. And so now we're finished, I guess. So we'll start throwing up some final photographs here of the model and the final scene itself. Again, if you've enjoyed this series, all 3 episodes of the Jagdpanther, I do encourage you to hit that subscribe and hit that like button. That does help. Of course, I do also have that Patreon page. If you'd like to support this channel further, I encourage you to go check that out for some extra features. Well, of course, this has been a fun and challenging to some degree project. So Zamirit for the first time, well, second time. Painting Zamirit for, well, the second time. Painting Splinter Camouflage for the first time. So a lot of new challenges on this project. I've enjoyed every second of it. I hope you have as well. Yep, new projects on the horizon. Not sure what they're going to be yet, so stay tuned for that. And as always, take care, everybody. We'll see you in the next one, and happy modeling.